We begin with the breaking news. The shocking arrest in Colorado overnight and the disappearance of a pregnant woman and her 2 young daughters.
Did you physically saw Shanann's disappearance?
No.
Are you lying about the last time you saw Shanann?
No.
Do you know where Shanann is now?
No.
On August 13, 2018, a pregnant mother and her 2 young daughters disappeared from their home in Frederick, Colorado. 3 days later, all 3 were found dead. Not killed by a stranger, not an intruder, her husband, their father. It starts with silence. Shanann Watts had just landed back in Colorado from a work trip to Arizona. Her friend and colleague, Nico Atkinson, picked her up from the airport at around 2 a.m. and drove her home. That was the last time anyone outside that house saw her alive. By midday, Shanann had missed a prenatal appointment. She wasn't answering texts. She wasn't answering calls. For a woman 15 weeks pregnant, that wasn't like her. Atkinson drove to the house.
Hey, Ben.
Hi.
You Nicole?
Yes.
Okay. So what's going on?
She knocked. She rang the doorbell. Nothing. So she called Chris Watts at work, and she called the police.
County Communications, this is CeCe.
Hi, CeCe. My name's Nicole, and I'm calling because I'm concerned about a friend of mine. She's 15 weeks pregnant, and she wasn't feeling well over the weekend, and I have called and texted. I've come to her house. She's not answering the door. She's not responding to text messages.
When officers arrived for a welfare check, Chris arrived too, granting them permission to search his own home. What they found inside told its own story before anyone said a word. Shanann's purse, sitting untouched.
Where's the purse at?
On the counter.
I'm still recording, so.
Yep.
Whose phone is that?
I believe that is his. Bomb overtook hers. That's from vomiting.
Is that a diary or what is that?
It's for work, I believe. I was thinking it was possibly a diary, but it's talking about
Her keys inside, her lupus medication inside. Atkinson would later say there was no way Shanann ever left home without that purse. Her phone was wedged between the couch cushions. Her car was parked in the garage, the girls' car seats still buckled in, and on the bedside table, her wedding ring. A woman doesn't walk away from her own life and leave all of it behind. So who was Shanann Watts? She was born in New Jersey and raised in North Carolina, in a tight-knit family that friends describe as the kind that shows up for each other. She battled lupus for years, a disease that never stopped her from working, from mothering, from building the life she wanted. Friends remember her as driven, competent, the kind of person who got things done even when her body was working against her. In 2010, a man named Chris Watts sent her a friend request on Facebook. She wasn't interested in him romantically, not at first, but he was patient. He was steady during a low point in her life, physically and emotionally. She would later tell friends that's what drew her in, not romance, but relief. Chris's own family didn't approve. They made their feelings about Shanann known early on. She was outspoken. She didn't shrink herself for anyone. It rubbed some of them the wrong way. It didn't stop the wedding. They married in November 2012, and not long after, moved to Colorado to build a new life together, away from North Carolina. They had 2 daughters. Bella, Bells to her family, born in 2013, and Celeste, who everyone just called CeCe, born in 2015. Money was tight almost from the start. In 2015, the couple filed for bankruptcy, citing close to $450,000 in combined debt against a household income of roughly $100,000. They kept the 5-bedroom house anyway. To the outside world, none of that strain was visible. Because to the outside world, Shanann was thriving. She sold wellness products for a multi-level marketing company, and she documented nearly everything: the girls' birthdays, her pregnancy announcements, her marriage, for thousands of followers online, vacations, date nights, blessed captions under family photos. To them, she was living the dream. But a life curated for an audience isn't the same as a life. And underneath the captions, something had already started to come apart. In 2018, pregnant with their third child, a boy they'd already named Nico, Shanann started noticing a change in her husband. He'd lost a significant amount of weight. He'd grown distant, quiet in a way that felt less like calm and more like absence. She told friends she was afraid he might be unfaithful. She was right to be afraid. That summer, Shanann flew to North Carolina with the girls to visit family while Chris stayed behind in Colorado for work. While she was there, she got into a fight with her mother-in-law, a fight that widened the existing rift between her and Chris's side of the family. Chris grew even more distant. Shanann told friends and family he was avoiding her calls and her messages, sometimes for days. She had no idea why. Not yet. What she didn't know was that while she was 1,300 miles away with their daughters, Chris had started seeing a coworker named Nico Kessinger. He told Kessinger he was already separated from his wife, already in the process of divorcing her. None of that was true. He even took a vacation with Kessinger while his pregnant wife and children were out of state. In late July, Chris flew out to North Carolina to join the family for the final week of their visit. Friends who saw him there said he seemed pulled away from everyone, present in body, absent in everything else. Shanann, meanwhile, kept doing what she always did, posting, smiling, documenting her growing belly for the world to see. At some point that summer, she sent him a long text message. She told him she was heartbroken. She told him she felt the distance, felt the missing affection, and she was afraid that he didn't want this baby, didn't want this marriage. He sent back vague replies, nothing that answered the question she was actually asking. She came home not knowing the truth. She would never get the chance to learn it from anyone. What investigators eventually pieced together is almost too cruel to say plainly, so we'll say it plainly anyway, because the victims deserve that. Shanann Watts had been strangled. Her body was buried in a shallow grave on the grounds of an Anadarko petroleum oil site, the same company that employed her husband. Bella and Celeste were not buried. They were pushed through the hatch of separate crude oil storage tanks. Each opening measured 8 inches in diameter. 8 inches. Weld County District Attorney Michael Rourke would later tell the press that a tuft of blonde hair was found at the edge of one of those hatches. Bella had scratches on her body. Investigators said they came from being forced through that opening. She had bitten her own tongue, more than once, before she died. She fought. For 3 days, Frederick searched for a missing family that the whole town, and soon the whole country, was praying would come home. On August 14th, one day after he killed them, Chris Watts stood on his own porch in front of a television camera and asked for his family back. Shanann, Bella, Celeste, if you're out there, just come back, he said, staring into the lens. If somebody has her, just bring her back. I need to see everybody. I need to see everybody again. This house is not complete without anybody here.
If you're out there, just come back. Like, if somebody has her, just please bring her back.
He was arrested the next day. Behind the scenes, the case was already collapsing around him. Investigators pulled his phone records. Buried in the data was something Chris hadn't mentioned to anyone: that affair with his coworker, Nico Kessinger. She had no idea he was still married, let alone that his wife and children were missing. Once she learned what he was suspected of, she cooperated fully with police, handing over messages that confirmed both the affair and how far he'd let the lie stretch.
He's so disgusting. I'm so ashamed of him and everything, and I just... Oh, those little girls. They're so little. They're so little. Why? Why? How? I don't even understand how you could, like, bring yourself to do that to somebody who's, like, that big.
Then came a neighbor's home security footage from the early morning of August 13th, time-stamped at 5:17 a.m., just hours after Shanann had walked back through her own front door. It showed Chris backing his truck into the garage, something neighbors said he never normally did. He usually parked on the street. It showed him walking back and forth several times, carrying bundles, loading them into the truck bed. Investigators concluded that footage showed him transporting his daughter's and his wife's body to the oil site, where they'd later be found. It also did something else. It proved Shanann never left that house alive that morning, directly contradicting what Chris had been telling police for 2 days straight. 2 days after his family was reported missing, Chris agreed to take a polygraph test. He failed it, badly, one of the lowest scores examiners had seen.
It's not even an option right now because you did not pass the polygraph, so I know you were being deceptive, so that's not even an issue right now. The issue right now is what happened to Shanann, Bella, and Celeste.
Like, I want them back home, like...
But you know they're not coming back home.
Confronted with the failed polygraph and the evidence stacking against him, Chris asked to speak to one person before he said anything else: his father.
She took both of them then.
I freaked out in the champagne.
So she killed both CeCe and Bella. Choked them to death. Lost it in the choke her or...
No, this is rage.
After that conversation, he confessed, but not to the truth. Not yet. He told investigators that he'd confronted Shanann about wanting a divorce, and that in a rage, she had strangled their 2 daughters as revenge. He said he found Bella already gone. He said he found Shanann strangling Celeste, and he said that's when he strangled his wife. He marked the location of the bodies on a photograph of the oil field.
What is that?
It's the Fairview 319.
Okay. Whereabouts is Shanann and the girls? Okay, can you mark it for me? The S for Shanann, okay. And where are the girls at?
Here. Are they in the tanks?
What's in the tanks?
It's a mixture of oil and water.
Investigators arrived at 11 p.m. that night and recovered all 3, Shanann from her shallow grave, Bella and CeCe from separate tanks. It would take months and a 5-hour follow-up interview in early 2019 before the full truth came out. There was no rage-filled discovery. There was no murder by Shanann. Chris Watts had killed all 3 of them himself. He admitted he strangled Shanann at home, after telling her he wanted to separate.
The last time we talked to you, it's a different situation, right? Our investigation was open and your case was open. All of our cases are closed and the court case is closed. So there's nothing that we're going to talk about today that's going to get you in any type of more trouble at all. Are you available to talk to us?
Definitely.
Okay. The last thing we talked about was where the girls were, but we never really got to talk about that night. So what happened?
I told her I didn't love her anymore. And that's what happened. I got on top of her. And every time I think about it, I'm just like, did I know I was going to do that before I got on top of her?
So what happened next?
And she had her little pink blanket with her. She's like, what's wrong? Wrong with mommy?
And where was Shanann at that point?
Yeah, she's pretty much on the bed, but she was face down.
While he was carrying her body toward the stairs, Bella woke up and saw him. He told her Shanann was sick. He loaded his wife's body and his daughter's into his truck, the girls without their car seats, and drove 45 minutes to the oil site. Bella, according to what Watts later told investigators, asked him in the truck, "Is the same thing going to happen to me as CeCe?" It did. At the site, He used a blanket from his vehicle to smother each girl, one after the other. Celeste first, then Bella. He was the last person either of his daughters ever saw. Years later, in letters to a pen pal reported by Inside Edition, Watts went further still, claiming he had tried to smother his daughters in their own beds the night before, in their own home, and failed. He also claimed he'd given Shanann a dose of an opioid found in her system, hoping it would end her pregnancy so he could stay with Kessinger without a baby tying him to the marriage he wanted to leave. On August 21, 2018, prosecutors filed the charges, 5 counts of first-degree murder, 2 for each daughter, due to their age and his position of trust as their father, 1 count of unlawful termination of a pregnancy, for Nico, and 3 counts of tampering with a deceased human body. Anadarko Petroleum fired him the same day he was arrested. He was held without bail. There was no trial. Colorado prosecutors made clear they intended to seek the death penalty, but Shanann's family asked them not to. They didn't want another death attached to their daughter's name. They wanted it over. So on November 6, 2018, Chris Watts pleaded guilty to every count. District Attorney Michael Rourke didn't soften what that plea represented. He deserves a life sentence for each and every act on top of one another, Rourke said. It was important that each of those beautiful human beings be reflected in the ultimate sentence that will be imposed. On November 19, 2018, Chris Watts stood in a Weld County courtroom to hear what would happen to the rest of his life. Shanann's father, Frank Razuchek Sr., spoke directly to the man who had once been his son-in-law. "I trusted you to take care of them, not kill them," he said. "And they also trusted you. You disgust me." The judge handed down 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. 3 to be served consecutively, 2 concurrently. He added 48 years for the unlawful termination of Shanann's pregnancy, 36 more for tampering with their bodies. The presiding judge called it perhaps the most inhumane and vicious crime he had ever handled. His bail, which had technically still existed on paper, was revoked on the spot. He was taken into custody and, weeks later, transferred out of state over unspecified security concerns. He's been serving his sentences ever since at Dodge Correctional Institution, a maximum security prison in Waupun, Wisconsin. A case like this one doesn't end with a sentence. It becomes something the public keeps returning to. In December 2018, ABC's 2020 sat down with Shanann's parents for their first interview since the murders. The same month, HLN aired previously unreleased bodycam and police station footage. Dr. Phil devoted an episode to the case, bringing in a panel of legal and behavioral analysts to dissect what kind of man does something like this. The Dr. Oz show followed in January 2019. In 2019, Shanann's family filed a civil lawsuit against Chris Watts and won $6 million, though his life sentence means they will likely never collect a cent of it. What they built instead was something less about money and more about meaning, advocacy work, and a public voice for domestic violence prevention, using their own daughter's death to try to help other families see the warning signs sooner than they did. In January 2020, Lifetime released a dramatized film, Chris Watts, Confessions of a Killer. Shanann's family said no one consulted them. They didn't know it existed until it was already in production, and they publicly called it inaccurate, and worried it would fuel the online harassment that hadn't stopped since 2018. Later that same year, Netflix released American Murder: The Family Next Door. Built entirely from real footage, body cam recordings, text messages, social media posts, home videos. This time, the family's blessing came first. Director Jenny Popplewell said reaching out to the Razucheks before filming was non-negotiable for her. 2 very different films. 2 very different relationships with the truth they were telling. In that same prison interview where he finally told the truth, Chris Watts admitted something that changed how the entire case is understood. It wasn't a single night of rage. He said he'd been planning to kill his family for weeks. Cases like this one are often called family annihilations, and researchers who study them note something chilling. They cluster in August, just before a new school year begins, when a missing child might not be immediately flagged by a teacher or a school nurse. Former FBI profiler Candace DeLong has pointed out that family annihilators usually take their own lives after the murders. Chris Watts later claimed he'd considered it. He didn't do it. He let his family die, and he let himself live. Shanann's family didn't get justice in the way a trial promises it. A jury, a verdict read aloud in front of cameras. They got a plea deal, and they chose it themselves, because they had already lost enough, and because no sentence handed down in that courtroom was ever going to be the thing that brought their daughter back. Bella Watts would be a teenager now. She liked to be called Bells. Celeste was 3, and everyone called her CeCe. Shanann was 15 weeks from holding a son named Nico. None of them got the chance to become anything more than they already were on August 13, 2018. If this case stayed with you, the best way to support this channel is to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us keep telling these stories. See you on the next one.